recording the lesson. Just to let you know, you will be given the GUI completely set up. You'll be given a spinner, you'll be given a button, you'll be given an area that it's going to be displayed in. You'll be given all of that. Now, what will happen is you'll have methods. So, for example, you would have had a method saying public void question 1, for example. And then you would be asked inside question 1, declare the following variables or do X, Y, and Z. Does that kind of make sense? So now, this is not, as far as a test is concerned, it's not going to be too heavy. We're literally just going to be doing a couple of, you're going to be doing methods like count up, count down, and Fibonacci, and one unseen pattern. So that is literally, there's no surprise, well, there's no direct surprises. The surprise is, in your test situation, I would have already mapped the actions. So the actions would already be mapped. You would have to do no GUI. Now, I'm also going to indicate that you will not be asked to do anything fancy with regards to these sort of stuff. You're literally just going to be going and you're not going to be actually creating you're not going to be doing the incrementing every period. So you're not going to be doing it based on that. So I'm actually just going to delete all this in here because I'm just going to do it from scratch. It won't take me long. And same thing with the countdown. So when you do these things, you're not going to be doing them step by step. You know what I'm talking about. You're not going to do a thread with the counter, making it delayed, etc. That's more for your projects. For your projects, if you need a counter, if you need it to run as a separate thread, those kind of things are more for fun. It's not examinable. I'm not going to examine you on that. But you do, important things that you did learn there is you learned the idea of a try-catch, the idea of actually catching an error. So if the user entered in something wrong. But we created a spinner that we know the model defined that it was going to be an integer. So we caught the error by ensuring that we had an integer only being allowed to be inputted into here. Does that make sense? So we actually handled errors by that. So that is important for future to handle errors. But we'll get into that. For now, we literally just deal with our basics for now. So now the first thing you might be asked to do is you would be asked to create a max. Now this over here is called declaring a variable. Does that make sense? Yeah. When you declare a variable, you're saying what? Now int is short for integer. So if I asked you to create this is also, sorry, I did skip this logic, but this is what we call a local variable. And the reason why we call it a local variable because it only exists between those curly brackets. Yeah. So for example, if I created a loop and I created int j or length bacon here, bacon only exists between those brackets. So a variable only exists between the brackets. Now in other languages like C and some others, you actually have to write code to unreserve that piece of memory and uncall that name. So that's why you get what's called memory leaks, which means that a program will reserve memory, and then when the program finishes, it would still have reserved their memory. It would have not unreserved that memory location. Does that make sense? So, but in Java and a lot of other 5th generation languages, it automatically removes that memory reference when it's being finished using. So these are what we call local variables. But things like your instances, you'll see at the bottom here, there's an instance of my buttons, there's an instance of my, these are all declared. I've declared an instance of my label, so forth. These are global ones because these ones are available for the whole class. They're accessible everywhere. I mean, they're private, so they can't be accessed outside of this class, but don't worry about that for now. But these are variables that are available everywhere, whereas this is a local variable. So that is called declaring. The next thing we would do is we would initialize the variable.
We do it in the same line. So.
Now, you can do it in the same line, but I'm distinguishing the concepts because I need you to understand the terms that declare and initialize. So now to initialize max, we would make it equal to, now this is something I want to show you. When I get the value that is selected there, if you look at the bottom right of it, it says object. that means that get value will get the value but return it as a data type object. Now, can I put an object data type into an integer? No. So you can force it by saying I want to force it into as an integer. So when I go int is the data type for integer, but there is actually a class called integer that you guys all know now. So integer is a class called integer that would have methods that we can use like parseInt, which would change a string to an integer. It doesn't change an object to an integer, but for example, if I use .getText, because I got the value as a text field, you'd use integer.parseInt. But we don't use that method because we're getting it as an object, because spinners return it as an object, not as a string. Okay. Now, in this case, so we force it into here, and we could enclose this with a try-catch, but I'm not going to be, next year we'll go into more try-catches and exception handling and so forth when we get into more object stuff. So for now, we're just going to leave it. We're going to get that as a max. And we're also going to now create a string variable called display, or whatever we want. We can call it, we can really call it anything. But I want you guys to get into a habit of calling it something logical, because when your code gets more and more complicated, it becomes more important that you actually know what the hell you're referring to. Otherwise, you might be, what on earth is that variable? I created a variable called if. If is for, I was going to say if I knew, but you would call a variable whatever you wanted. Now, in this case, the string display, the data type that is being given there. Okay, so now if I go here, string display, remember it goes data type name, right? So data type name. Yeah. Now you'll notice that int is blue but string is not blue. So why would that be? Now, just for interest's sake, and this is for next year's concepts mostly, but string is not actually a data type. It is a class. And the reason behind that, because technically char is a data type. Sorry, we're not just use I, let's say C. So char, which is character, is a data type. A string is actually an array or a list. Remember you did arrays when you did playgrounds, right? String is technically an array of characters or a list of characters. Does that make sense? So it's actually more complicated than just a space and memory. It's actually got a lot of things to it. So also when you compared strings, you guys might have found this when you were doing your calculators. When you compared strings, you had to use a method to compare strings. You couldn't just directly go equals equals. Well, you could, because Java finds a way around it, but generally speaking, it's bad logic to do that. Now, display is equal to, I'm just going to declare it, initialize it as blank. So I've declared it and initialized it on the same line. You can do that, like Connor was asking. But I just wanted you to understand that there are separate items. You can declare something and you can initialize something. And you need to initialize something as blank if you're going to use it. The reason why is if you try to use it before it's initialized, it actually doesn't exist. A pointer exists, but it doesn't point anywhere. Only when you initialize it does that pointer actually reserve a space in memory to actually be remember what it's talking about. So now we're going to loop. So now shortcut in Java. Now remember, there's a lot of shortcuts. So if I type 4 and I press the button tab, it will automatically create a for loop. Now a for loop is exactly like a while loop. It declares. Now a for loop is when you know the number of times that you want to loop, you declare a for loop. A while loop is often used when it's unknown. During the loop, it might change. Yeah. Whereas before you enter the loop and you know how many times it should loop, then you use a for loop. Now, in this case, I'm declaring I, and I'm initializing it to 0. So that's how it begins. It then says I am only going to stop when I is no longer less than 10. So it's going to loop until that is true. So in this case, we want to change this to max. And I++ means every single time I iterate is a meaning of one time of going through the loop. That's an iteration. So iterate is to loop. So you need to become familiar with these terms. I'm going to be doing that. Now I++ will increment it by 1 every time I iterate the loop. Now we'll just want to make display plus equals is the same as saying equals display plus. So nice little shortcuts. Yes?
So am I right that I minus minus means I equals I minus 1?
Yes. Okay. I minus minus subtracts 1. I++ adds 1. If you want to add 2 though, you would have to go I is equal to I plus 2. You don't go plus 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 plus. That doesn't work. But yes, minus minus does work, or plus plus. Now in this case, display plus equals is the same as saying display is equal to display plus whatever. In this case, we wanted to add I plus we want to put a comma and a space.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Now, I'm just going to put a semicolon at the end there. I am then going to go, that's the method done. After I've looped through, I'm going to change my, I think it's called LBL display here, dot set text. So you make sure, remember, and this is what bugged me. A lot of you thought, oh, it was a defined word, LBL display. It doesn't exist. The only reason it exists is because oh, hello. Don't do that. The only reason it exists is because I created a label and I named that label LBL display. So it is an object that I created. I could have called this LBL bacon. And then in which case I would be referring to here LBL bacon. I mean, I could have called it whatever I wanted to. It's just I called it something that made logical sense. It's a label, so I called it LBL because it's a label. If it's a text area, I'll call it TXT. If it's a whatever, I'll call it whatever. But so LBL display was just a logical name because it's what I'm displaying to the user. So LBL display, and then you see here, there's a list of methods, tons of them. That means this label object has all of these methods that can do all of these things. If you don't know something, read it. Oh, set baseline resize behavior returns an enum indicating the baseline of the component which changes da 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 da. It gives you information here. What it returns an enum indicating whatever. I don't even know what that is. But get border, it returns a border type, and it tells you what it returns, what it receives. So get components at X and Y. It'll go refine a component at X and blah 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 blah. Do you guys get that?
Yeah.
So it shows me all details inside here. But what we are going to work with is we are going to work with the set text attribute. And you'll notice set text receives a string representing the text it should display, and it is void. You see the right hand side, it tells me the return type, so it doesn't return anything, which means it does something, and it will change the text value to what you put through. So if I put there display, it will then display that display. That was just long. Okay, so basic, and then now if I go count up to 9, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, you'll notice it counts from 0 to 8. I want that to be the case because later on when you deal with arrays, you deal with the first position in the array being 0, not 1. So I want you guys to start getting used to that numbers start at 0, not at 1, in computing anyway.
Yeah.
At least in a lot of languages, some Microsoft-based languages try to be special and they start at 1, but most other languages start at 0. Yes.
But even so, if you want to count up to 9, so you'd still want the 9.
If you would still want the 9,
Sure.
realize this: 0 to 8 is 9 numbers.
Yeah.
So if you wanted 9 numbers, you would go 9. And I'm not going to mark you down if you do it like this or the other way. But if you wanted it to go up to include the maximum value, you would go equals.
That makes sense.
So less than or equal to max, and then it will include that value. But that depends on if you are wanting to include it or not. Personally, I feel I would rather it. In this case, I don't care. Yeah.
So if you change your int I to 1 and then you left it just as greater than max,
If you change this to 1, it will go 1 to 8.
1 to 8 still.
Yes. Because less than or equal to max. So if I go here 1 to 8, because 9 is not less than max.
Okay.
9 is is equal to max. But so it is less than or equal to will include the value.
Equal to 8. Okay.
Yeah.
But if it's greater than or equal, then it will equal.
Less than or equal to. This is less than.
Okay.
Now, so this is done. Are you guys happy with this?
Yeah.
Now, one thing that would bug me is if you do the count down, for you to start again would annoy me. Control C, Control V. I starts at max while I is greater than 0. Done.
You do the minus. Yeah. Then
Oh, sorry.
minus,
Thank you.
minus.
Good well spotted. So minus minus, otherwise it's a never-ending loop. So instead of plus plus, instead of going up, you go down. Now this means I don't have to redo all of the stuff I did earlier.
Yeah.
So it goes a lot quicker. So now if I press play, and I go basic, and I go countdown from 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now again, it doesn't include 0 because I didn't say greater than or equal to 0. Yes.
Okay.
So just a question: if you did plus plus, right?
It will be a never-ending loop. It will display nothing. Because the reason why is, okay, let's do it. If I did a never-ending loop, you'll notice that if I press play now, and I said basic screen, that basic screen is annoying me at the moment. Anyway, if I said countdown, it's just going to do nothing, and I can't click anywhere else. And the reason why is because in memory, it's going up, down, down, and it's actually only going to. It will give me an error eventually, and it'll only give me an error when integer goes up to, I think it's 32,563,722 in Java. There's a certain amount of RAM it spares for an integer. So at some point while I'm talking, hopefully, it would have incremented to above that value that I can hold. And then I'll go, whoa, I am now. But constantly in the background, it's going up by 1, 1, 1, 1, adding to display. So it's adding a comma, I, comma, I, comma, I, comma. So 1, comma, 2, comma, 3, comma, 4. So eventually, hopefully while I'm talking, I'm going to remove this off the screen for now. And then while we continue coding, and hopefully eventually it will come up with the error here, and it will say to us it's exceeded the size of RAM. Because it's a never-ending loop, because it's going to never exit, because it's never going to become less than 0 because it's going up. It's never going to become 0 because it's going up, not down. So we'll see if it does eventually freeze and give an error. It might be a while, but we shall see. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is the even one is easy. Public void even, and the same thing with the even one. I could just copy and paste it into here. The only thing I'll change is instead of plus plus, I'll go I is equal to I plus 2. Now because it starts at 0, it would go even, so it will go 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, whatever. So I'm happy with that. But now the next one is your Fibonacci. Now interestingly enough, this even won't work. Why? Because technically I never actually made the even call the even button. But now, for your test and probably your exam as well, I might do a little bit of I'll do one GUI question in your exam, but it'll be very separate from other stuff because I don't want to examine, if you can't do your GUI, I don't want you to lose marks for your backend, and vice versa. If you can't do your backend, I don't want you to lose marks for your GUI. So it will be a very separate item. Okay, let's see how it's going for the error. Nope. Okay, it's going pretty well there.
So will we get more time for our exam this time?
You have 2.5 hours, and I'm going to make the HTML a bit shorter than what it was. Okay. Now alright, now when you go over this, you'll notice that now the next one I wanted to create was a Fibonacci one. So for the Fibonacci, yeah, I spelled it right. You'll see that you know that we solved it. I'm not going to go through how to solve it again because I've already gone through how to solve it in pseudocode, and I showed you guys how to do that. But we knew that we created a variable called x, we started it at 0. We created a variable called y, we started it at 1. We created a string called display, we started it at 0, 1. Right?
Why 0,1?
Because those values have already been indicated. That's the starting point of Fibonacci.
So x is 0 and 1.
Yeah,
You mean
I
0
get that.
1. So
Yeah, like
1, 0,
string
1.
displays. See, I'm.
Remember, when we play the count up, when we display it, we go 1, 2, 3. So we already have 0, 1 in our Fibonacci sequence. So I've made my display equal to the 2 points in the Fibonacci sequence which already have been initialized.
That's how it starts.
Yeah. So that's this here is the start point. Because you have to have 2 numbers to start the Fibonacci. You can't start with no numbers, otherwise it's impossible. So this is the start point. Now this is where we do our iterations. Now you'd have a choice. You'd either loop up to that maximum number, or you can loop that many number of times. And I'm going to loop for that many number of times. So we're going to, I would again, if I've got this code up here, copy, paste. So I'm going to set my max to that value. So int max to that value. I am then going to create my z. So int z is equal to x plus y. So I'm literally just adding together my items there. I do have, if you guys are battling to understand Fibonacci, if you search my channel for Fibonacci, I've got one where I'm doing code, a flowchart for Fibonacci, as well as code, as well as that goes in more detail if you are battling with Fibonacci. There is a Fibonacci video that I did create. But now, so we've got the Z, and from the Z, we're now going to be doing our loop. So for our loop, it's a known number of times. So here I'm going to loop from 0 to while it's less than max. Now, do you understand that if max was 10, this loop would loop 10 times. If max was 5, this loop would loop 5 times. So this will be max number of iterations of the Fibonacci sequence. Yes.
Is there a code that can exit a for loop if like a certain data exists?
There's a lot of controversy around this statement. Some people say it's very illogical to break a for loop before it's, or break any loop. Break means it will exit a loop.
So break, can you go break if this?
Well, no, you'd go if, and then you'd say inside the if break. Yes. So if I said if open brackets I, but you don't rely on that. That should not be your norm. You shouldn't always exit when you press break. It's considered bad logic. You should. If there's an exception where there's a weird thing happened during it, and you want to now handle that exception by exiting it, you use break.
So how would you want to count up to Fibonacci? If you don't want to do iterations, you want to count up to the number of Fibonacci and then exit.
Then you'll just say while Z is less than max. So instead of I less than max, you change this to while Z was less than max. It would then loop while the number is higher than that value. But now if you want to work with iterations, you would so I is your iterations, the number of iterations, Z is your next number. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm going to use R for now. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go, here we're going to say we just need to go display plus equals display, plus if we don't need to say display again, plus equals comma space, because now I'm saying the comma before Z. So now 0, 1, comma, what x plus y is? 1. So it would add 1 at the end. And then we're going to go here, we're going to say x is equal to y, y is equal to z, z is equal to x plus y, semicolon. We now just go to our LBL, my bad, LBL display dot call the method set text. We're going to send through display, happy birthday. We now need to, in my GUI, make sure my button is mapped. I didn't even have a button, so step 1 button. But remember, as I say in your test, I am not going to have any. Just something that some of you might appreciate is you have something here called minimum size. And it is a good idea sometimes to set a minimum size of frames to make sure that it doesn't start off crazy huge or crazy tiny. So here I set mine to a minimum size of 600 by 400. That's why when I ran this, it would always open it up. Now, I'm going to save all of these. Now, let's see if my output has frozen. Okay, it still hasn't. But if, for example, you have got a never-ending loop, you can just click the close here, and this will cancel the process and exit and allow you to run a new one. So if you click the close here, hey, even this is frozen. Okay, close. Yes, it will then stop the build from going there. I'm a bit sad that I didn't get to the end of the loop. Yes.
You recording this?
Yes.
He asked you a recording, sir.
Oh yes, I'm recording it. Yes. Okay. Now, I'm thinking on recording you. You don't. There's no video of the webcam.
Just sort of flashing arrows and recording.
Ah, yes. No, that's because I'm recording this. Now, the next thing you've got here is if I press now. So I need to make my Fibonacci number the action. I've got to add the action so that it will call the Fibonacci method. And then when I call that method and I press play, you'll see there that it can go to the basics again. We want to do 10 iterations, 6 iterations of Fibonacci, 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. So if I want to do 10 iterations of Fibonacci, it goes up to that. Just for interest's sake.
So,
Yeah.
would you rather have us count up, as in like on the screen you can see it going?
For your test, no. I don't want you to do that at all. Yes. The reason why is for the test, that requires some things that aren't even examinable at later levels. I want you to know them, because they're fun. But I don't want you don't have to do those things. It's not actually part of your syllabus to have to create threads and to create a counter, total sleep for a bit. You will have to do a try catch, you will have to handle errors and stuff, and it'll be good to use for your project, but it's not something that's examinable in test situations. So I don't want to get used to having to do cool stuff for tests. Cool stuff is for projects.
I was just asking what you
Cool.
prefer.
Now, so this works. I think that's the end of the video. Say goodbye.
Bye. Subscribe to my channel.
Carl Hennon said that.
Johnson, why didn't you say goodbye, man?